addiction.
I am dressed.
I'm glad you're not naked.
David, nu twist down.
It's okay. Now. Are we zoomed? Cool. According to the National Library of Medicine, 1 out of 10 Americans over the age of 12 is classified as chemically dependent. This means that you almost certainly know somebody affected by drug or alcohol use. Despite the prevalence of the problem, few uninvolved people truly understand the process of drug addiction. Many people think that addiction is a moral lapse, or a matter of willpower. In reality, addiction is a complex physiological process that is directly linked to the production and the reception of chemicals that occur naturally within the brain. I've done extensive research on heroin addiction, both clinical and scholarly, and today I'm going to teach you how heroin interacts with the brain, and then I'll teach you how the brain creates tolerance and how that tolerance causes an addict to go into withdrawal when they stop using. In order to understand addiction now, first we'll have to explain some basic brain chemistry. Our physiological state is regulated by a precise balance of chemicals within the brain that either excite or retard different components of your nervous system. These chemicals are called neurotransmitters. Dopamine is the neurotransmitter most closely associated with the pleasure and reward circuits in the brain. Dopamine is involved in every process we enjoy. Sex, art, food, everything. Heroin produces a high by telling the brain to release massive amounts of stored dopamine, causing an intense euphoria. Prolonged heroin use causes a buildup of dopamine in the brain. The brain recognizes the imbalance and has some incredible ways of dealing with it. The brain's attempt to maintain chemical balance is called homeostasis. The brain's neuroplasticity, the ability for the brain to change, has developed 2 ways to prevent the excess dopamine from being utilized. Number 1, the brain releases CRFs. These are chemicals that block dopamine receptors. So they fit over top of the receptor, and they stick there to prevent any dopamine from coming through. The brain also exhibits downregulation. Downregulation is a process by which a cell actually destroys its own dopamine receptors to decrease the quantity of dopamine that the cell can absorb. Both the production of CRFs and the destruction of receptors are long-term effects taking place over months or years. Now, the metabolic life of drugs, however, is significantly shorter. When an addict stops using, their dopamine levels drop fast. Because heroin is only psychoactive in the body for about a day, the brain's attempt to regulate dopamine levels through CRF production and long-term downregulation wreak havoc on the user's body. When the brain is low on dopamine, we feel anxious, withdrawn, and dissatisfied. As the entire brain detoxifies, the body also goes into withdrawal. Common withdrawal symptoms include chills, fever, muscle soreness, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, lack of energy, the inability to be satisfied. The severity of this state, as well as the desire to remedy it, is what commonly leads drug addicts to relapse before completing a detox regimen. The worst of the process lasts about 5 days, but it can take months or years before dopamine levels return to normal and an addict starts to feel like themselves again. I hope that after listening to my speech, you have a clearer understanding of the process of addiction. Your handouts have diagrams and definitions of the parts of the human brain afflicted by drug use. They should help you to see how, from first use to last use, the addicted brain is scrambling just to feel normal. So the next time you see a junkie begging on the street, don't judge him. Try to remember that he's a victim of a condition that leaves him inherently irrational. Thank you for listening. I'm dressed.